PCM TV is supported by Salient Systems, a world leader in video management security, and by Revolutionary Clinics, a medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. All right, we're here. It's Friday afternoon. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
Joined by his trusty sidekick, David Rabinovitz.
That is awesome. Everything worked out great. We are going to be talking about data and how to use data and why data is considered gold in so many industries right now, including the cannabis industry. But first, our headline interview at 4 o'clock is Michael Correia. He is the Director of Government Relations for the NCIA down in Washington, D.C. He's become kind of a regular on our show. Michael, thank you so much for joining us again.
It's always great being here, and I like being a regular.
That's awesome. Well, we're happy to have you, and happy to find out exactly what's the update. Everybody wants to know, are we going to have cannabis reform in 2021 or not? You know, what is going on in Washington, D.C. these days?
So big picture, I'm still optimistic. When the Georgia election happened in January and everyone's like, Democrats are going to control, cannabis reform is a foregone conclusion. And I've never been more optimistic than I have been in my 8 years, but I just want people to realize that Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, they just don't snap their fingers and magic happens. You need to get the votes, and the votes in the Senate are 60, and there's only 50 Democrats. And so when you want to do anything, you're going to need to get Republicans to cross over and be supportive. I always tell people it's a math issue. I just love the fact that on 4/19/4/20 last week, Chuck Schumer said, you know what, it would be great if we had cannabis reform within a year. And then the next day's headline in the Politico was, Senate Democrats don't want cannabis reform. And they were on record saying how they didn't like it. And it was pretty disheartening when you saw Senate Democrats saying why they didn't want cannabis reform. So the reason why I bring this up is it's simple math. You do the math. You have 50 Democratic senators. Okay, you lose one, you lose two, you lose three, you lose four. Now you have to find a dozen, 13, 14 Republicans. Is there support there for cannabis reform? And that's the big issue. But, since the last time I talked with you guys, the Safe Banking Act has passed the House, which is always great. That passed with an overwhelming majority, 320 supporters. I think they even got some more Republicans. So the numbers on something like SAFE are very high. And the beauty of SAFE is it's not a cannabis reform bill. It's a banking bill. It's a safety bill. And so I just, I tell people, like, there's tremendous support for our issues, but we have to be realistic in making sure, we can get something over the finish line. And, I think we could get SAFE over the finish line, but it's whether our own supporters would want something like that or they would want more comprehensive reform. And those are some of the things I've been working on. And when you go, what's the update? I hate to say it. It's sort of business as usual. We have been in a waiting pattern for a month now, plus just waiting for Chuck Schumer and Ron Wyden and Cory Booker to drop their bill. And we've been waiting for the House Judiciary Committee to drop the MORE Act again. So the very moment we've been talking to the committees, talking to the offices, just wait. We haven't seen anything yet. So once it happens, once it drops, we'll be able to say, yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down, or what we need to do to get it over the finish line.
David, go ahead. No, he's got it. You know what? Will you unmute your microphone?
I said, Jimmy, go ahead. I'm still on mute, and I want to try to shift my chair around so I can watch the stream over here without everybody always seeing me turn my head looking up.
All right. So, do you have something, or you're gonna come back and not? I can follow up with Michael. I got no problem as usual.
He's gonna do some dance moves.
Yeah.
All right.
How difficult is it to convince every Republican, or are you targeting 10 specific? And the first one I'm thinking of is the former governor of Massachusetts. It's Mitt Romney, who is probably the most moderate Republican, at
Yeah.
least in the last few years. What's his, obviously the question is, have you talked to Mitt?
So one, from our strategy, we will reach out to offices, and offices are most of them are going to be courteous. They're going to say, sure, we'll take the meeting. And when I say meeting, pre-COVID, when we had meetings, now everything's a phone call or a
Right.
Zoom call. And a lot of them, they'll take their notes. Thank you. We'll talk to the boss. And that's all you get. Sometimes they'll be more specific. You'll love this. We had reached out to a Republican Senate office to sit down and talk about the Safe Banking Act. And they had recently legalized in their state. We're not going to name the state, but you can guess. And their response was, don't even waste your time with their office. We're not even going to get there. Spend your energy somewhere else. And we're like, wow, thank you. We don't have to beat around the bush. You already know you're a no, and it's not going to go. So from a lobbyist standpoint, it saves me some time. But we will look at offices and say, have they said anything recently that's somewhat positive, or has their state recently legalized, where we can make that end and say, hey, listen, 70% of your voters support this, or 67% of your voters support this. It's a big issue. Here are the issues, and see where they've evolved on the issue, because a lot of them on this issue, they may not care about it. And then their voters speak on behalf, and it's like, whoa, you got my interest. Now I'm interested. So, we're doing our due diligence with Senate offices on SAFE, trying to get more co-sponsors on SAFE. And then once this discussion draft drops from the 3 senators, then that may be the bill, and then we'll go from there. And then having that debate of what should be moved first, comprehensive or incremental, or how we do it. It's just one of these things we have to juggle.
Yeah, I get you.
How many
David?
states, Michael, I should know this off the top of my head. I don't, but I suspect you will. How many states have legalized adult use, recreational marijuana?
So it's so constantly changing. I think it's 16, and I think Virginia is going to be, it's legal, but they put it at some date in the future. So I think it's 17, but that's where I'm going off. So why don't we go 16 and a half?
17 sounds right to me. On those states, do you know how many of them are red states versus blue states with respect to the Senate?
Well, that's the thing. Historically, they were almost all blue states. And then you would have a state like Alaska that was a red state. You would have Maine, Susan Collins, that was a red state. Most of them were all blue. But let's be honest, we had 4 states legalized within a month or something like that? What was it? Yep. New Jersey, Virginia, New York,
New Mexico,
a couple others. Yeah, New Mexico. All within, a couple weeks time. But if I glance, I'm looking at my, mental chart, most of them are going to be blue states. The red states tend to be in the South and tend to be in sort of the Midwest, Rocky Mountain Midwest. And so those are, I hate to say it, some of the last cannabis reform states on the book, but I always love it, when a state like Virginia comes around. I spent 10 years of my life in Virginia, the old Confederacy. It's sort of a blue state now. It trended purple for a bit, but still seeing stuff south of the Northeast, going legal is always a great sign.
Right. So this is one of my issues with politics in general. The fact that we do have a 2-party system, and everybody, David, you just did it. Red state, blue state, Republican, Democrat. When are we ever going to understand that this issue is an issue for both sides? It's for the betterment of this country. And it actually, the plant itself is supposed to bring people together. It's almost like I want to go down to DC, fire up a joint, and pass it around the damn Congress and explain to people, chill out and just figure out a way to get this moving forward so that we can go ahead.
I hate to say it, but there's always politics involved. And I don't know if we're ever going to get beyond that. When you look at nonpartisan issues, at one time it was like transportation. Everyone loves their freeways. Right. That's even become political. The military was always, everyone loves the military. Let's just spend a bunch of money. And on one of these issues, even though what the majority of Republicans support this and a super majority of Democrats. I just think that Republicans are always going to look for a wedge issue. They're always going to look for issues that are going to separate us versus them. And this could be it. And, you know, who knows? Maybe 4 years from now, the country is legal and it's just a foregone conclusion and forgotten. But I still think, you know, it's going to be a bit before Republicans truly give it a hug and embrace this and say, we love it. I mean, you look at something like, I don't know, global climate change or something like that, or the environment, where you go, oh, the general public really supports this, but it tends to be a partisan issue on the way they go about it, even though it's broadly supported. I think it just may be one of these issues they use as a wedge issue. It's like, no, we're just not comfortable with it. And one of the big, another big issue is the Republican Party, Sheldon Adelson was a big funder of Republican politicians. He recently passed away, but if you wanted any of that money, he was such an anti-cannabis prohibitionist. And on the Republican side, it's stuff like that where, you look at the puppet and the puppet master and some of the funding, when these guys are saying, no, you can't have that position on marijuana. Well, then they're just going to take these bad positions on marijuana because they're going to want that funding source. So it's stuff like the politics that we really have to. It's not, I try to tell people it's not common sense, it's politics. Don't think about common sense here.
They're supposed to listen to their constituency. And it seems that any time that the ballot question has anything to do with cannabis, more voters show up. They put different candidates in office. Seems to me, I'm hoping that the voters actually remember how challenging it is at this point, especially on the Republican side of the fence. And the frustrations of those that are out there in the advocacy world, it's paramount. I mean, we're all sitting here going, I don't get it. I don't get it. Yeah. Do you think right now, as you know, President Biden has put out this quadrillion trillion budget out there. And in any kind of negotiations, you always ask for more than you really could settle for. Is there any place that the cannabis issue will be able to kind of sneak in as a political pawn issue to move more of this agenda forward?
That was a story I think was sent out in the media a couple of days ago. Like, they're looking at different approaches because, like I said, you have standalone cannabis, and that's going to take 60 votes in the Senate, 218 in the House, get it on the president's desk. Or then you have some big spending package. At one time it was the pandemic spending package where they use budget reconciliation, which is a little budgetary process that only 50 people need to vote on, not 60. And so Democrats usually can just run through and get it done. Mm-hmm. So there's that topic, but then it's whether it's germane or not. So yeah, there are some legislative tools, but let's be honest, if you've been following the news, Biden's office has been sending up smoke signals like, hey, we don't like this. Hell, they were firing people in administration that had some cannabis in their background. They're saying like, hey, we're not comfortable with this. So they're definitely not saying this is a priority of ours, which you'd go figure. You talk about the politics. Every pollster I talk about, when they poll this, it's just through the roofs on the support. And you would think that politicians look for these winning issues, and you think a Democrat would sort of get this and say, listen, this is going to be my issue. It may not be number one on my list, but it doesn't need to be forgotten on the list. And no one was ever going to say Joe Biden was going to be a cannabis reformer, but I think some people are a little let down every time they open their mouth in the White House and something bad is said.
Well, think about it. It was part of their platform. Decriminalization was part of their platform. Cory Booker is a champion of social justice. He's trying to make sure that we can move this forward, at least in legal states. We need to get the people that are incarcerated out of those prisons and have a plan for them. Let's not just open up the doors and let them go out. Actually have some kind of a workforce development plan in place. I'm sure they're looking at this, but it bothers me. This is what bothers me about politicians. They'll say one thing to get elected, and then, as you know, it's like, well, I'm not quite sure that's what we meant when we said it on the campaign trail. That's what drives me the most crazy.
Yeah.
That's going to come back and bite Biden in a few years.
Oh, yeah, because hey, let's be honest. Where's all the energy with the Democratic Party? It's on the activist wing on the left. An election's coming up in 18 months, and those activists, all of a sudden, they're not excited about some of the platform and candidates. Well, they're not going to be as active, and you'll see. So yeah, I think it's dumb. I don't think he needs to be out there saying great things, but he shouldn't be out there saying horrible things on some of this. They should be definitely working on their message. And it is surprising. It is surprising the lack of knowledge with some of these people in leadership. You would think by now it would just have filtered through with society. I mean, Colorado was 8 years ago. It's not like this is just happening overnight. To just have a position on cannabis, what exactly your position is for a politician. I would think that every politician now would have a position on cannabis.
I think every person in America has an opinion about cannabis at this point.
America has already spoken. I mean, every time it's on the ballot initiative, it's more popular than any person running for office. So I think, and I remind people that in DC all the time, that listen, you're not going to find anything more popular. It's the great unifier. I wish we could be doing more events in DC, in-person events, because this is truly the great unifier. The biggest problem, I'm seeing is it tends to be a lot of the Republicans we deal with are crazy on this issue. They're great on cannabis, and then they believe in insurrection of the government or something else. And you're just like, okay, you hide your head and you're like, I don't want to be seen with them. So it's finding good Republicans out there like Dave Joyce of Ohio and others who are just traditional. They just believe in their Republican issues, but they're good on cannabis, making sure we embrace them and we build up support on this. Because, this is a Democratic issue, but I think we need to be bipartisan in everything we do. And I try to be bipartisan on this just to build support. I don't know, this is my 8th year doing it. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years once we get this over the finish line. Like, we need as many friends as possible.
David, you got another one?
Go ahead, Jimmy. Keep going.
Oh God, he is a piece. I gave you like 6 questions this week. I know one thing. I think that we'd be remiss if we did not ask you, Michael. I know you knew Steve Fox, and I know that he passed away recently. Can you give us some thoughts about the impact that he's had to you and on the NCIA effort?
So, on a personal note, I have this job because of Steve Fox. And when I applied for this job, I met with Steve Fox at Union Station right down the street. And he spent some time with me chatting about this job before he was flying out to Denver. And he could have easily said, you know what, I don't like this guy. And I got this job because of Steve. Steve knew more in his pinky than I would ever know in my whole body than most people would know. And everything cannabis related, I always deferred to Steve. He's been fighting this fight for 20 years. And we had all heard about it the next morning, and we were just all like, just shocked, and I did tell, I shed a tear on the drive home thinking about his family and his kids and everything. It was just such a sad day. But no, he means a lot. He means a lot to NCIA. I mean, he was a co-founder of NCIA and everything we did because he had the vision to know where like this issue was going, and that's it's amazing. I always respect people that can see into the future and see where things are going 5 and 10 years down.
Absolutely. Well, again, appreciate those thoughts. I knew that there was a personal relationship there, and I thought we'd be remiss if we did not. When we first talked a few months back, you always talked about that low-hanging fruit. You used the Safe Banking Act as a good example. It's now passed 4 times in the House. How do you keep up your edge? Because I'm guessing a lot of times you feel like you're just, shoveling shit against the tide, as they say.
I know that my job's not done and I have to keep doing it. When I took this job, I thought it would be an 8 to 10 year process. So I was mentally, now we're in year 8 and we're getting close. The frustrating thing with me is, for 8 years, I've said SAFE was a great incremental job or a great incremental bill to an approach to get us to a little more certainty. It's illegal at the federal level. States are going forward. Let's pass something like SAFE, and it makes it easier for the cannabis industry. Well, now we're talking about reform. Yeah, cannabis reform is great. Let's change the laws. Let's legalize it. Let's do it. But if the math's not there, let's go back to what is there, and that's safe. And I worry that our champions on the Hill are like, no, we don't want safe. We have to go more. Well, then we're going to get nothing. And so we have a meeting with Sherrod Brown's office next week. Cross my fingers. I hope it's a good meeting, and I hope, they're able to understand. But the story I tell everyone is if you pass safe, it levels the playing field for everyone. Small businesses, people of color, anyone that can get access to capital, it makes their job easier. So it's a great small business bill. It's not just for big, companies. They already have banking, so it's not for them. And then let's focus on the other reform and let's get to the hard stuff. So I don't want the narrative to be it's safe or more or safer, reform. It should be like, let's get reform, but if we can't, let's pull back and here's safe and let's do it. I don't want to wake up 18 months in the election and, and the Democrats say, wow, we could have gotten safe done, but we didn't. And now we have nothing. Like, I don't want that discussion to happen.
Right. Let's get on base first.
I try to be the realist in the room on this.
Let's get on base first and worry about scoring the run down the road. I think so too at this point. But again, I don't speak for the whole movement. I'm just giving you my opinions. That's what we do here on the Green Rush when we go live every Friday at 4:00. Michael Correia, as always, love talking with you. You're welcome anytime. If anything good happens in that meeting, don't be afraid to share, and we'll get it out there for you.
It'll be on our next update.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Enjoy you guys.
Great.
It is that time.
Yeah.
David, it is that time. It's the 4:20 time, right? It's that time on Friday afternoon.
That time on Friday afternoons when Jimmy will tell us the history of the Waldos. He'll tell us about his favorite band from New Hampshire, and he's going to just lead us right into it. So take it away, Jimmy.
So this is an interesting thing. I learned something this week from our friends at Rev Clinics about the history of 420 and of all things, the fact I had actually heard this before, but I was really just sticking to the facts. The facts are that there was a group of high school students at San Rafael High School that would meet at 4:20 at the Louis Pasteur statue, and they'd catch a buzz until law enforcement caught on, and then they started using public consumption of cannabis going on with that 420 code. The other story to this, how it got from this little group to the world is through one of my favorite bands, the Grateful Dead. And it had to do with one of the original Waldos, Dave, who was friendly with Phil Lesh, one of the original members of the Grateful Dead with Bob Weir, Jerry Garcia, and Bill Kreutzmann. And they are the ones that grasped onto that 420 and shared it with their followers. Now, David, what are the followers of the Grateful Dead called?
Deadheads.
Oh, yeah. You are hip, man. I don't care what anybody says. All right. In the meantime, let's listen to Jonathan Edwards and take our time out for Shanty. When we come back, we're going to talk about how data drives cannabis. We'll talk about that after this break. Don't go away.